Yeah, we may as well just stay here, sake of time. So my name's Martin Chilvers, field crops pathologist. I've got Keeley with me today. She just defended her masters yesterday on wheat viruses. We'll talk about that in a minute. Got Jan Byrne here too from the diagnostic clinic. Jan. And then DeFonso, of course, to help us out on the insect side of things. So just a quick rundown of what we've seen disease-wise this season. Last year, spring of 25, we did have some snow mold in central Michigan. We didn't see that so much this particular season. Last year and this year, on the west side of the state, some pretty heavy powdery mildew. So that was in March, as early as March. So Jason Stejink let me know about some powdery mildew on the west side. I'll come back to this. We are concerned about fungicide resistance, just like we are with herbicides. It seemed that powdery mildew was responsive to a strobilurin fungicide, and that's out of all the sort of three main classes of fungicide, that's where we'd expect to see resistance development first. So on the powdery mildew front, at least at that location, it was responsive to the strobilurin, so that was a good thing. We obviously keep a really close eye on stripe rust, and what I do is watch a national map to see what is going on elsewhere across the country, because that may inform any spore fallout in this area. So Kansas is one of those places we look to, and it was pretty quiet in Kansas this year. They've been struggling with drought and other stress conditions. This year it sounds like they've had a lot of leaf rust, but not so much stripe rust this year down in Kansas. So about May 20th, 21st, we had our first detections in the area. So that was in Wisconsin and Ontario. Both of those states or provinces lit up about that time, but we didn't have any reports here until June 1st. So Dwight managed to find some on his place just at June 1st, right? Rich. I'm confused. Rich Diassi, so Rich. No worries. So Rich found that near Kingston on his place, back of the field. The photo you sent me too, it looked like it had been there for probably about 3 weeks, just based on how yellow that wheat was in the back part of the field. And it was very evident from your photo that effective variety. Right? You had two different varieties in there. Those susceptible varieties light up so fast. So a really good lesson in a photo there, and that went out through that Michigan wheat newsletter as well. So with respect to stripe rust overall, we also had some reports in Lapeer and St. Clair, and I'm sure it's elsewhere. It's also in Ingham County as a couple of weeks ago too. So it's popping up, but it's certainly very late compared to the 24 epidemic we had, or that 2016 epidemic. So when we start finding it in early May, that's when we're certainly in for potentially a wild ride, depending on how things develop. We want to really get it across it. And as we're thinking about fungicide applications, I know some of you put it in the tank with a herbicide as you go across at that T1, Fix 5, 6, 7. That's fine. It's not going to eliminate your rust risk. It may suppress things a little bit. In those epidemic years, I want you to be out scouting, and we really need to get that application on if it is flaring, probably around flag leaf, Fix 8, Fix 9. If you don't do that and wait until flowering, it's going to be too late. Or you're relying on that early application, it's also potentially going to be too late. So you've got to really be timely with those applications for stripe rust, because it just does develop so quickly. Head scab this year, the model was indicating sort of moderate risk conditions across the state. Some high risk just on the west side of the state, and obviously we were pretty dry through most of flowering, and so the risk certainly dropped off over time. If things are relatively clean, we don't need that stripe rust application, fungicide application. That timing it flowering can be helpful just to keep that canopy clean as we finish out the season. So anyway, that's sort of an overview of what we've seen so far this season in terms of diseases. The last couple of years, Keeley's been doing a wheat virus survey. So this sort of started with Jeff, Dennis and others finding quite a bit of virus around. And so we thought we'd do a more systematic survey across the state. And so for the last 2 years, 24 and 25, Keeley went out and sampled. So I'll turn it over to her now. We are seeing quite a bit of barley yellow dwarf in this particular field, and some wheat streak mosaic virus as well. So it's right here with us.
Hello, everyone. I am Keeley, as Marty said. So I've been doing a wheat virus survey the last 2 years, and through those 2 years, I was able to find that wheat streak mosaic virus was the most prevalent virus across the entire state. It was kind of interesting. So in both years, it was found throughout the state. I was able to sample 27 different counties between the 2 years. And so it gave me a really good snapshot of what was happening across the state for both years. So it was prevalent throughout both years, but there was a higher incidence of wheat streak mosaic virus in 2025 than in 2024, which I'm sure some of you up here really got to see that in 2025. I know I did when I got to sample. It was kind of astounding to be able to see a virus from the road as you're driving. That's not how wheat viruses tend to operate, so it was very eye-opening for me. And to put this in perspective a little bit more, in 2024, there was only one county that had 100% of samples positive for wheat streak mosaic virus. It was Ionia County. It's like on the west central side of the state. While in 2025, there was 4 counties with 100% of samples positive for wheat streak mosaic virus. It was Bay County, Ionia County again, Hillsdale County, and then also Huron County, which I'm sure for some of you is really no surprise. And then I also looked at barley yellow dwarf and cereal yellow dwarf viruses, and those were the second and third most prevalent viruses across the state. But something really kind of neat happened. So these viruses are transmitted by aphids, and in 2024, they were frequently detected throughout the state and majority of the counties that I sampled from. But in 2025, they were less so, which is kind of interesting. It's also kind of interesting, while I haven't been conducting an actual survey this year, but between looking at our fields in East Lansing and then also this field, we're able to see a lot of the typical symptoms of these barley yellow dwarf and cereal yellow dwarf viruses, which is why I have my wheat in my hand. So in this wheat, you can kind of see, if you're close enough, I guess I should say, you can kind of see some of yellow tips and also these really pretty red tips, or like purple tips, depending on your definition, I suppose. And this is a pretty characteristic of these barley yellow dwarf or cereal yellow dwarf viruses. As a reminder, just seeing symptoms or virus-y symptoms is not a diagnosis by any means. I don't trust myself, and I've seen a lot of virus symptoms from my surveys, so you should always submit your samples to Jan right there, just as a reminder. And then also for wheat streak mosaic virus, sorry, I'm kind of going out of order a little bit. The symptoms of wheat streak mosaic virus are those streaking symptoms. There's a leaf right here if you're close enough to be able to see, but if you look out, you'll be able to see it eventually in a field. And so it's just kind of like streaking, pale green, yellow. I'll keep these on me a little bit for a little while, so if you want to get a close look, I'll point them out to you. So that's for being able to identify that virus a little bit in the field, or at least be able to go, maybe I should do something about it. For wheat streak mosaic virus, since it was the most prevalent virus across the state, as kind of a reminder, it's transmitted by the wheat chromite. And so these wheat chromites are really, really small. And so they can be very difficult to control by insecticides, and often that's not actually a viable control method. And even for the barley yellow dwarf and cereal dwarf viruses and controlling the aphids, that's not actually a viable option, is to control these vectors by insecticides, since they're often very tiny and hard to control, especially for the wheat chromite. And so in order to really have good wheat virus control, it often comes back to more of a cultural method of management. And so we recommend terminating your volunteer wheat 2 weeks prior to your fall planting. And the reason why this is because you have these wheat chromites, and once your wheat starts to mature and starts to senesce and die, those wheat chromites climb to the tippy top of the wheat plant, and they proceed to stick their butts up in the air. The weirdest insects there is, I swear. And they catch the wind or they drop down, where they will then be able to either, hopefully, ideally, they'll land on a potential host. And a lot of times that's volunteer wheat. It can be other grass species like corn is another potential host. But volunteer wheat is really, really good for these mites. That's where their populations can really grow. That the wheat can be infected with wheat streak mosaic virus, and then it also just continues to live the rest of the season, which is perfect for them. And then in the fall, once you plant your wheat, then they can once again migrate to that newly planted wheat, which puts your wheat at really high risk of this occurring, and you can have a higher incidence of wheat streak mosaic virus. So we target that volunteer wheat so that we can eliminate that food source for the mites. And these mites are kind of wimpy. They can only last like 4 to 6 days without food and water. And so if you kill the food source, then you tend to kill the mites. And so then you're able to kind of put a break in that system. And so then you're less likely to have that high incidence of wheat streak mosaic virus in your newly planted wheat in the fall. And based on research, there's some limited research on this, but based on research, it's been found that your highest yield losses from viruses in general, but also wheat streak mosaic virus in particular, is from those early infections, so early in the season, early in the growth stage when those plants are really small. And then also with this, I know this is a really complicated issue in controlling your volunteer wheat and what you're doing and what someone else is doing and how that affects everything, since these mites can move for very large distances, even up to like 2 miles away, so it does matter. I last year was sampling, and I was in a wheat field, and there was kind of virus symptoms on the edges, which isn't abnormal. But then right next door, there was a volunteer wheat field, and I was lucky enough that the farmer was planting beans right across the road. And so I stopped him and I asked, I was like, yo, what did you do to control your volunteer wheat? What happened in this field? Just give me a little bit of knowledge of what's going on. And he told me, that's not my field, that's my neighbor's field. So I do know that it's a very complicated issue, and I understand that, which is why a lot of times for virus management, it really is a community issue, and keeping everyone on board with the same thought process so that you can keep your wheat healthy. And it is hard because I know that involves communicating sometimes, and sometimes not everyone gets along, and not everyone's goals are the same. But it is kind of, at least just keep that in the back of your mind as if you're thinking about wheat virus management and what that means, and how sometimes, even if it's not important to you, how it might be important to someone else. And just, like I said, communicate. That's always a good thing. That's all I have to say about my wheat virus stuff. Hopefully it was at least interesting, but I will hand it back to Marty. Thank you so much for listening.
So just to clarify on that, wheat streak mosaic virus is the most common, and one of the easiest things you guys can do is try and terminate that volunteer wheat, particularly when it's right next to your next crop that you're about to plant. Okay, that's the really critical piece that we want to get across. We have handouts as well, just sort of describing a little bit more of that survey work. We're also doing some work. Keeley did some inoculations this spring on some different lines, a whole bunch of different material that Eric and Dennis and Andy put together for us. So we're trying to do some additional screening to look for resistance to these viruses. So we'd be happy to take any questions you guys might have. Oh. Right, so bacterial leaf streak. No doubt there are additional issues that we need to be looking at. Yeah, we did actually do some confirmations of Pseudomonas leaf spot as well, just this year. So bacterial leaf streak has certainly become perhaps an increasing concern in some other states, and that's something that we are planning to take a look at. Just yet another potential yield robbing element that's out there. Yeah. And I think part of our challenge here too is just trying to figure out, what is holding a field back. One of our questions, even on the virus side of things, is how much yield loss are we seeing from moderate to minor infections that are out here at the moment with this barley yellow dwarf, right? And the same question would go, for that bacterial leaf streak. How much do we have to be seeing for that damage to really be taking off yield? A lot of it is to do with time period too. So the earlier disease sets up, of course, the less photosynthetic area, but that is another one of interest to us. Yeah. I think this year it's going to be pretty quiet in terms of head scab. There are a few sort of slightly newer products. They've been around for a couple of years now, right? So we still have Prosaro. We've got Prosaro Pro now, Miravis Ace that you're all probably familiar with, and then Spheric. So we sort of have 3 or 4 different products there. In our work, they all work quite well. So most of our screening work is done down on campus. We have irrigation so we can create those conditions to really screen those products. Yeah, we have some stripe rust trials down there as well, where we'll inoculate intentionally and screen those various fungicide products. Sometimes we print out fungicide efficacy guides. Every year we update those for soybean, corn, wheat. So if you go to the Crop Protection Network, that site is full of risk prediction tools and these fungicide efficacy charts that you can pull up and take a look at. But my guess is this year will be pretty quiet on the head scab front. I guess just related, we are doing some fungicide resistance screening for the Fusarium that cause head scab. We hope to expand that to corn as well. We're trying to find some money there to do that, get a better understanding of what exactly is going on there. So with this wheat project, it's funded by the US Wheat and Barley Head Scab Initiative, so it's a national look at things. We'd actually done something through Michigan Wheat here locally. We found some differences in sensitivity to the fungicides, but not enough to create differences in the field when you spray them with a fungicide. So we took these like more resistant strains, and they weren't resistant, but more insensitive, put them out in the field again, from Michigan, put them back, sprayed them, and we were able to control those, which was really good to see. But nationally, we're trying to take a look at that if there's any fungicide resistance popping up. We are seeing some resistance in the strobilurins actually in the Fusarium. That doesn't really matter too much for head scab because we don't really use strobilurins for head scab management. We use DMIs. That's the main underpinning of most of the chemistries we use, a group 3 fungicide, and then SDHI is a group 7 fungicide, and so we haven't seen any signal of resistance in those yet. Just talking about fungicide resistance really quick, we are this year trying to look at resistance to foliar fungicides, foliar pathogens. So we're collecting a lot of foliar diseases like Septoria, Staganospora this season, and just going in and checking for fungicide sensitivity in those. So if you want to participate in that, if you've got some wheat disease you'd like us to take a look at, we'd be more than happy to take samples for that. So, yep.
As far as terminating the wheat in the fall,
yep.
Is like disc chiseling or like that, or would you have to spray it to kill it?
So the question there is in terms of terminating that wheat around virus management. Tillage might be enough. I mean, it'll definitely knock things down, I guess, but we just don't want to. We want to make sure there's no living host there. That's the big thing. So whatever you're doing, if that's knocking things down enough, that might be sufficient for that. Yeah, it might be more efficient, definitely, or better to have a burn down application prior to that. But it's better than not doing anything. That's for sure. The more reservoir you have there for the virus and the vector, the worse things are going to be, right? So anything is better than nothing, that's for sure. Yeah. Cool. All right, we'll be here through lunch. If you have any questions, please come and find us.